This is the engineering office down there. And this is David St. Ange. Nobody, no, not many people here. And down on this side is the FM offices. All right, now we're moving on to the second floor of 125 Western Ave. Well, the most unusual thing I ever had in this elevator was a horse. Jane Alexander was doing something for CBS Cable, and I rented the facilities at WGBH. It was the Diary of Calamity Jane, and it was a series of little vignettes, and one of the things had a horse that had to be standing next to it. The only way they could get the horse in was through here, and then walked him down to Studio A. Now this was the main office area for the early days when the WGBH existed only in one building, not in the 11 that they're in now. But they're all executive offices, and all the way through, back through here. Now it's a Boston Media Productions, which does Say Brother, La Plaza, and Basic Black.
Basic Black, Say Brother.
Yeah, and then La Plaza and Greater Boston. This was the outdoor area where you could go and have your lunch. Obviously not used too often now. These were offices, Dave Davis and Bob Larson, yep. Mike Ambrosino, Peter Downey further down, but now it's the state-of-the-art editing. Cameras are taken out of the studio. There must be some kind of event going on. Now moving into Studio A. What's your name?
Randall Gray.
Randall, how long have you been at GBH?
Since 1978.
And what are you doing?
Right now I'm putting the site because they're having a luncheon for Fetch, which is one of the shows here at GBH. They're having a pre-season, if you will, luncheon for all staff involved.
This is one of the few places, I think, in this building that has not changed at all, except for the lighting system. But the studio itself is, as I remember it, when I walked in here in 1965. Yeah, there was a story about Chaz Norton, one of the head lighting guys here, who was up on top of an echo lift and was basically doing some lighting by himself, and had the lift extended up and was holding onto the lighting grid, trying to pull himself across the floor of the studio. And as the story goes, the echo lift went out from underneath him, and somehow somebody discovered him hanging from the grid and got him down.
When the building was under construction, I told Hartford Gunn that he could have a visitor walk in the front door, go down the hall, go up the elevator, go into his office, and think he could be in a shoe factory. Never know that this was a TV station at all because nothing was visible. I strongly suggested, and he agreed, that we put a window into Studio A right in front of his office. And that is the Michael Ambrosino Memorial Window. Of course, that was before the building was finished. As Studio A was finished, what was the first thing that was done? Well, they bought a big cyc, and they covered up the window. Just like that. So they put a announce board on the other side of the window, and they had little announcements that were there. I don't know how much that cost WGBH, but I've always considered it my window.
All right, let's do a quick tour. Right here, I remember this was Lotta Lenya doing a performance right there, Lotta Lenya. I remember right here, Leonard Bernstein, Bernstein, conducting with an orchestra here and one in Studio B. Over here, the Coasters brought them in here to do, what was the name of that? Yeah. Mother's Little Network. Over here, Olivia, help me. Oh, it was David Silver sitting with the guy from Transcendental Meditation. Here, this is where I remember Henry Morgenthau giving his speech at the 2000 reunion, in which he said WGBH did mediocre programs, but they gave really First class sex. Well, he said, no, not first class, maybe economy. Pete Seeger, right over here, doing a show called Two Links of a Chain. French chef, Julia Child, right there, right here.
Her counter was right about here.
Right.
Back of the set back there, and then the dining room. The dining room wall was right about here. It's right here. The first time that I ran camera on the French chef, I was running the close-up camera. So I had the camera way up in the air, shooting down on the table, getting the close-up, and they said, "Break one for the dining room," and I broke like this, except I hit Paul Child right there and knocked him almost over to the wall. And that was the last time I ever ran camera on the French chef.
Gunther Schuller conducting a modern piece of music. No, it wasn't. It was ragtime. Remember, he brought ragtime. So that took place right here. There's so many memories on every inch of this floor.
Kevin Bacon in Lemon Sky.
Kevin Bacon, Lemon Sky, right there, right over.
David Wilson
David Wilson.
riding around the studio on a motorcycle for part of one of the What's Happening Mr. Silver programs. That was a program that I threatened I was going to quit my job at GBH because it was way out for me. And that program actually went on to win a Programming Excellence Award. God bless you, Fred.
Everywhere in the studio, in every conceivable floor space, we did for 20 years Alistair Cook's Intros to Masterpiece Theater.
Right.
Alistair tells a great story. For those of you who remember the Intros to Masterpiece Theater, he said he was in Florida giving a lecture one time, and after the lecture, a woman came up to him and said, "You know, I just want to tell you, Alistair, Mr. Cook, that I love your set." And he said, "Well, which one is that?" She said, "Well, one of the bookcases in the armchair." Now, for all of Alistair's time, there was a different set for every series. Every series had its own set, right, Bruce? Right. And it was designed by Fran Mahard and Clint Heitman.
The set she may be thinking of was the Muppet who did Alistair Cookie. That was bookcases in the back and a big wing chair. And he would say, "Hello, I'm Alistair Cookie, and this is Monsterpiece Theater." So I bet that's what she was referring to.
He had this odd habit of wanting to have salt on the set all the time. And before he would start, he would take a little salt and put it in his mouth. And I said, do you want some water? He said, no, salt is much better. Salt keeps you wet, keeps you from drying out. And I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
And helped people to stay wet through many productions.
Over here, Abby Hoffman threw LSD across the room on a What's Happening Mr. Silver show. Over here, we had Joan White and Alex Peary in a bed in Stan Vanderbeek's Violence Sonata. It caused the Boston Globe to write an article about a black woman and a white man in bed, and Kevin Kelly, he had great concerns about what we were doing here at Channel 2.
Were Lily Tomlin and
Danny Aykroyd.
Gilda Radner.
And Dr. Irwin Corey.
Right.
And we were doing a piece that Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin had written called Collisions, which actually never really saw the light of day. It was an experimental, never finished piece of video.
The students took over Harvard University in the 70s, and the university president would not speak to the students. So a member of the Board of Overseers brought a couple of the other Board of Overseers to the WGBH studios, and in an immense table, students and the Board of Overseers discussed what was wrong with Harvard University, and WGBH televised it live for hours on end.
We were doing a production with Kurt Vonnegut Jr. called Between Time and Timbuktu. And at Kurt's request, we had Bob and Ray running Mission Control. It was a story about a space poem competition. And Bob and Ray were on the set, on camera, and they were trying to recall what Neil Armstrong said when he first stepped on the moon. And they could not get it right. And Vonnegut was sitting just off camera and got laughing almost so hard that we had to stop the take. And if you've ever seen that show and you listen to the two of them trying to remember those lines, you can hear Vonnegut in the background going.
Here's another event that took place during one of the auctions. There was a large turntable with showcasing some furniture. On one side was a living room, and on the other side was a bedroom. Sally Dennison, who used to be my production assistant, had gone off to become a Hollywood casting director, and as a matter of fact was in town looking for Antonioni's lead actor for a movie called Zabriskie Point. And I had introduced her to a guy by the name of Ed Beardsley. They had become fast friends, and Sally was a rather uninhibited young lady. She and Ed had had a bit of stimulants, let's say, and they had decided to take off their clothes and to jump in bed so that when the turntable turned during the auction, you'd find the two of them comfortably wrapped in each other's arms. I pleaded with them not to do it, and I finally got them onto the studio. Thank God.
Everywhere, uncontrollable wires running in every space, in every direction. I would go to other production houses and there would be almost no wires, and I'd come back and go, why can't we have no wires? But it came from there's an early tradition, it was long before my 40 years here, that you had to have wires everywhere. On the floors, on the walls,
Ceiling.
on the ceilings, and probably even in the brand new control room. This is A Control as rebuilt the second time. There's been 2 rebuilds of A Control. When I first came here, the monitors were basically there. Audio booth was over there. There was a row of seats here, theater type seats, fold down. Video was up front next to the wall. If we go up here, we look very closely, we will see massed wires. And I bet if we go down here, we'll see more, although this is not like it used to be in the old days. I get actually feeling very uneasy with this few wires. And they've done a darn good job, I think. Audio is that black hole up there. But I've personally found this control room really easy to work in. It was really done right. The GBH controls are actually modeled on CBS control rooms, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
But the layouts were a replica of CBS. Right.
Greg Harney came from CBS, and he was production manager, and that kind of influenced all of us. As a matter of fact, most of the directors in the early days, you had a snap to make sure that you got it exactly the right time. I remember one time when Dave Atwood was my switcher on a What's Happening Mr. Silver program called Madness and Intuition, in which we had all kinds of people all over the control room, and they were supposed to yell out when they're bored. We would change the image because the images didn't make any difference. It was based on John Cage's theory that if any sound is music, then any picture could be a television show. And I remember I was going to buy David a rolling pin so that he could go up and down the switcher and keep the things, moving. And we insisted that all of us have take phone calls after the show was over with. And David Silver, the host of the show, took one of them, and the woman said, some older woman, "Please cut that out. You're giving my brain cancer." And one of the really interesting things, David, and I don't know if you remember this, there used to be a guy who would come in here and he would take pictures of us all. He was kind of like a hanger-on. He was, you remember his name, Olivia?
Dan Healy.
Dan Healy.
Usually wore a trench coat.
Yeah, usually wore a trench coat and used to take pictures. We just thought it was just another one of those hangers-on because we always had all kinds of people hanging around. We kept the doors open. We thought it was fun. Years later, I caught a plane out of New Jersey, and the fog came in and closed us down. We had to take a car, and I ended up in the car with Dan, and he then told me the real story. He was Army intelligence.
Oh, come on.
Yep. Yep. They had a dossier on us.
No.
Yep.
You're telling this on videotape, Fred.
I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what he told me. That's why he was taking the pictures.